My dear friend Oklahoma lived on my street, and he looked after me like a big brother. He was someone I could laugh with, argue with, and truly talk to. He was also the first person to call me a feminist. In her 2013 TED Talk, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie displays the major gender discrepancies that affect our world today. We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I was about 14 and we were in his house, arguing, both of us bristling with half-bit knowledge from books that we had read. Now, I don't remember what this particular argument was about, but I do remember that as I argued, Okoloma looked at me and said, "You know, you're a feminist." This was not a compliment. I could tell by his tone, the same way you would say you are a supporter of terrorism. Now, this word feminist, I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't want Okoloma to know that I did not know. So I brushed it aside and decided the first thing I would do when I got home was look up feminist in the dictionary. Now, fast forward some years later when I'm promoting my novel in Nigeria. A journalist, a nice, well-meaning man, told me he wanted to advise me. He said that people were calling my novel feminist, and his advice to me, and he was shaking his head sadly as he spoke, was that I should never call myself a feminist because feminists are women who are unhappy because they cannot find husbands. So, I decided to be a happy feminist. At some point, I was a happy African feminist who doesn't hate men and who likes lip gloss and wears high heels for herself and not men. This, of course, was a lot of tongue-in-cheek. But that word feminist has so much baggage, so much negative baggage. I often make the mistake of thinking things that are so obvious to me are just as obvious to everyone else. Now, take my dear friend Louis, for example. He is a brilliant and progressive man, and he and I would often have conversations, and he would say to me, "I don't know what you mean by things being harder or different for women. Maybe in the past, but not now." And I could not see how Louis could not see what seemed so self-evident. So one evening in Laos, Louis and I went out with friends. I was so impressed with the particular theatrics of the man who had found us a parking spot that I decided to leave him a tip. Now this man, who was so happy and so grateful, took the money from me and looked at Louis and said, "Thank you, sir." Louis looked at me and asked, "Why is he thanking me? I didn't give him the money." Then I saw realization dawn on Louis' face. The man who believed whatever money I had ultimately come from Louis because Louis is a man. Now, men and women are different. We have different hormones, we have different biological abilities. Women can have babies, and men can't. Men have testosterone and are generally physically stronger than women. There are slightly more women in the world. 52% of the world's population is female, yet most positions of power and prestige are occupied by men. The late Kenyan Nobel Peace Laureate, Wangari Maathai, put it simply and well when she said, "The higher you go, the fewer women there are." Gender matters everywhere in the world. And today, I would like to ask that we begin to dream and plan for a different world. And this is how we start. We must raise our daughters differently. We must raise our sons differently. We do a great disservice to boys in the way that we raise them. We stifle the humanity of boys. We define masculinity in a very narrow way. Masculinity becomes this hard, small cage, and we push boys inside the cage. We teach boys to be afraid of fear. We teach boys to be afraid of weakness, of vulnerability. We teach boys to mask their true selves because they have to be a hard man. But by far the worst thing we do to boys by making them feel that they must be hard is leave them with very fragile ego. The more hard man a man feels compelled to be, the weaker his ego. But we do a much greater disservice to girls by teaching them to cater to the fragile egos of men. We teach girls to shrink themselves, to make themselves smaller. We say to girls, "You can have ambition, but not too much. You should aim to be successful, but not too successful, otherwise you will threaten the man." If you are the breadwinner in a relationship, you must pretend that you are not, especially in public, otherwise you will emasculate him. But what if the question is the premise itself? Why should a woman's success be a threat to a man? What if we decide to simply dispose of that word? And there isn't an English word I dislike more than emasculation. Now, men and women will say, And this is something I'm amused by. I did it for peace in my marriage. Now, when men say it, it's usually about something they shouldn't be doing in the first place. Something that shows how masculine they are and how needed and how loved. My wife says I can't go to the club every night, so for peace in my marriage, I only do it on weekends. Now, when women say, I did it for peace in my marriage, it's usually about giving up a job, a dream, a career. We teach females that compromise is what women do in relationships. We teach girls that they cannot be sexual beings in the way that boys are. If we have sons, we don't mind knowing about our sons' girlfriends, but our daughters' boyfriends, God forbid. But of course, when the time is right, we expect those girls to bring home the perfect men to be their husbands. We police girls, we praise girls for virginity, and we don't praise boys for virginity. And it has always made me wonder how all of this is supposed to occur. The loss of virginity is usually a process that involves two people, right? Boys and girls are different, undeniably. But socialization exaggerates these differences and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I am still trying to unlearn many of the lessons I internalized growing up. I still feel vulnerable in the face of gender expectations. But gender isn't an easy conversation to have. And to bring up gender is to bring up almost immediate resistance from both men and women. I very often think of my dear friend Okaloma, and he was right that day many years ago when he called me a feminist. And when I looked up the word in the dictionary that day, this is what it said. Feminist, a person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. My great-grandmother, from the stories I've heard, was a feminist. She fought, she protested, she stood up. She ran away from the home of a man she did not want to marry and married the man of her dreams. Now, my great-grandmother didn't know that word feminist, but it doesn't mean she wasn't one. I think many of us should reclaim that word. So, I'll end with my own definition of feminist. Feminist, a man or a woman who says yes, there is a problem with gender as it is today. Yes, we must fix it. And yes, we must do better.